Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly monumental Supreme Court case. It's a landmark decision from 1901 that quietly laid the legal foundation for how the United States governs its territories. And the crazy part is, it still impacts millions of people today. All right, let's dive right in with a surprisingly mundane number, exactly $659.35. I know it sounds incredibly small, but this exact tax bill, demanded over a simple shipment of fruit, literally almost broke the U.S. constitutional framework. I mean, imagine triggering a full-blown existential crisis over citrus.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the oranges of San Juan. Second, we'll tackle the core question: does the Constitution follow the flag? Third, we'll examine a deeply fractured Supreme Court. Fourth, we'll break down the incorporation theory. Fifth, we'll look at historical precedents from Louisiana to Alaska. And finally, we'll cover the long-term impact. Section 1, the oranges of San Juan, the setting and the dispute.
We start our story in November 1900. Samuel Downs, operating as S.B. Downs & Company, just wanted to import a shipment of oranges from Puerto Rico to New York. Sounds simple, right? Well, when his fruit arrived, the port collector, George R. Bidwell, slapped him with a bill for exactly $659.35 in duties. Why? Because Congress had just passed the Forker Act. Specifically, the third section of that act required a 15% duty on goods coming from Puerto Rico relative to foreign imports. Downs wasn't having it. He sued the port collector, arguing that since the U.S. had just acquired Puerto Rico from Spain, it was now officially part of the United States. And, as we know, under the Constitution, you can't tax goods moving from one part of the country to another.
Section 2, Constitution, follow the flag, the central question of the scope of the United States. This hyper-specific disagreement over oranges quickly zoomed out to reveal a massive existential crisis for the nation. You see, the Constitution explicitly states that all duties, imposts, and excises must be uniform throughout the United States. So the absolute core question before the Supreme Court became, does the Constitution follow the flag? If Puerto Rico is now U.S. territory, how on earth can the U.S. legally tax its goods as if they're coming from a foreign country? Essentially, when America acquires new land, does the Constitution automatically apply to it? Or does Congress just get to make up the rules? Section 3. A fractured Supreme Court. Dueling opinions on territorial power.
Unsurprisingly, the Supreme Court was deeply divided on this, turning the courtroom into a dramatic intellectual battleground. You have this really stark contrast between the justices. On one side, Justice Brown championed the doctrine of territorial distinction, arguing that Congress has absolute power to govern territories that aren't fully part of the U.S. He believed these lands were appurtenant, meaning they belong to the U.S. but aren't strictly bound by constitutional revenue clauses. This essentially echoed the argument that if a territory isn't represented in the House of Representatives, it isn't fully incorporated. But then on the other side, you have Chief Justice Fuller's fierce dissent. He championed the follow the flag argument, firmly insisting that the Constitution restricts Congress absolutely everywhere the flag flies, making strict geographic uniformity in taxation completely mandatory. Section 4. The incorporation theory explained. Justice White's pivotal concurrence.
To resolve this massive fracture, Justice White introduced a legal theory that would permanently change how the United States expands. He formulated the incorporation theory, drawing distinct lines between temporary military occupation, fully incorporated territories, and a brand new category he championed, appurtenant or unincorporated territory. These are lands that belong to the United States but haven't been legally incorporated into it by Congress. Inhabitants there are granted basic natural rights, like the right to life and property, but they're withheld the full procedural and revenue protections enjoyed by the states. To really wrap your head around this, think of an incorporated territory as a permanent family member who shares the house, right? While an unincorporated territory is kind of like a temporary guest staying in a backyard tent. They belong to the property owner, but they don't automatically get full access to the house's benefits until the owner explicitly invites them in.
Section 5. Precedents from Louisiana to Alaska. The history of expansion. Now, the court justified this new legal category by looking back through history and pointing out that, well, Congress had actually been doing this for a long time. Back in 1803, with the Louisiana Purchase, incorporation into the Union was delayed entirely to the pleasure of Congress. Then in 1819, when Florida was acquired, Congress independently created territorial courts that operated completely outside standard constitutional rules. And later in 1898, with the annexation of Hawaii, discriminative customs duties were temporarily maintained. Justice White basically pointed out that time and time again, Congress had repeatedly assumed the Constitution didn't just automatically extend to new lands of its own force.
Section 6. The long-term impact. The so what for the student.
So, why does this dense, century-old case still matter profoundly today? Well, we can break its long-term impact down into 4 simple steps. Step 1, the court officially created the unincorporated territory status. Step 2, it ruled that the Constitution does not follow the flag automatically, a legal concept known as denying ex proprio vigor. Step 3, because of this, Congress is allowed to exercise absolute plenary power over these territories. And Step 4, millions of people in these lands are provided natural rights, but full constitutional rights are legally withheld. By ruling this way, the court essentially enabled the U.S. to function as a global empire, holding lands that belong to the United States but are not legally a part of. Now, not all the justices thought this was a good idea. Dissenting Justice Harlan left us with this really fierce warning. He argued that allowing Congress to operate outside the strict bounds of the Constitution creates a highly dangerous colonial system. He famously warned, "We will, in that event, pass from the era of constitutional liberty, guarded and protected by a written constitution, into an era of legislative absolutism." For Harlan, the government literally could not exist or operate anywhere outside the supreme law of the Constitution.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to ponder about the hidden legal mechanisms still governing American lands right now. How does the legacy of the unincorporated territory continue to shape the modern reality of U.S. borders and the rights of millions today? The 1901 decision in Downs v. Bidwell created a legal status that places like Puerto Rico maintain to this very day. So the next time you look at a map of the United States and its territories, remember that tiny $600 tax dispute over oranges that fundamentally changed what it means to be a part of America.